Hello everybody, welcome back. We can no longer turn 180 degrees, or can we? Woo, speed potion. Okay, a while ago somebody rotated the starting orientation and I was all confused. There's an Elder Guardian up here now, look at that. The potion doesn't work. See? But we have a book. Things keep happening. Block hunt. We click it and it teleports us to our map, which saves us walking all that distance. Fantastic. So, today, I would like to talk a little bit about lag, as the episode might, the episode title might suggest. So, I was over here with my map and my redstone, and I suddenly realized, by the way, I've been working on redoing the damage system. I suddenly realized that the server was at 100% CPU. These three clocks between themselves bring the CPU up to 100%, and it was basically crashing. So Spider and I, Spider Robot Man, that is, I don't think he has a channel. If he does, I will link it. It'll be in the description. He's a smart guy, very good with command blocks and server running. But we basically went around reducing the lag caused by these clocks. And I just want to go over some of the things we did, because I don't think, myself included, many people know much about how command blocks are processed by a server, how you can reduce and increase lag, and things like that. So, because I learned quite a lot talking to Spider yesterday. Most of this is observation. If anybody in the comments wants to tell me something else I don't know, feel free. So, one of the things we did, actually, hang on. Let's start at the basics here. So, the major cause of lag in command blocks, that's not the thing I wanted to middle click, is the entity selector. Can be at A, at R, at P. At P is not very bad for a reason I'll explain in a second, or at E. Entity selectors, basically, who the command applies to. Now, that is basically the major cause of lag. So, for example, let me show you something which, an entity selector which is good. So, at P is great, because that's just one entity, and it's very easy for it to calculate. Now, if you do at E, which is what I was doing up here. This is my my damage translator. So over here we had basically all entities. I hadn't chosen an entity yet. It now says type equals skeleton. Custom name health 19. Even though you are testing and only applying it to mobs with a health of 19, it still tests every single entity. If you don't put anything in here. So entity selectors that apply to a lot of mobs, such as at E or at A, especially at E, cause a lot of lag because it has to check so many people. So that's interesting. The other thing is radius. So at A is a lot less laggy than at A R equals 100, because for a radius command, it has to check every single block in that radius for players. I believe that's basically how it's calculated. We discovered that testing for all players is a lot less laggy than testing for all players within a radius of 100, even if it's finding more players by not having that radius. So small radius commands, like 5 or, I don't know, 20, are fine, because it's a lot less blocks to check. But the bigger you make this number, every time you increase that in size, you're adding a lot of blocks to that search. So something worth thinking about when you're working on your redstone. And the other thing we discovered was that scoreboards. So first of all, keep your scoreboard files to a minimum. If you have I mentioned this is Mineathon Map Making with Sparks, by the way? I'm on the Mineathon server. You probably know that though. Anyway, so scoreboards. Let me just show you something a second. Scoreboard. Objectives list. We have so many scoreboards on this server that we can't even list them. I scroll up as far as I can go, and it just, you can see that the messages that I was getting earlier from Vazek logging in and stuff are gone. We have a lot And as far as I'm aware, people have been deleting them. But the more scoreboards you have, the bigger the scoreboards file, and the longer it takes for a command block to process a scoreboard value. So if you don't know, on a server or on a single player world, you have a file called scoreboard.dat, I believe it's called. There's basically a scoreboard file. Lag, I have turned these clocks off, right? Yes, I have. Is this one off? Not my fault. So scoreboards, keep them to a minimum. And also, all the scoreboards are lumped together into one file. So you want to avoid doing something like adding everybody to a scoreboard, because it basically the scoreboard value just builds up and builds up. Like adding entities to a scoreboard without ever clearing them means that scoreboard file gets longer and longer, and eventually, and every time it's longer, it takes longer and longer to read. There's Spider, he's the one who helped me. Just talking to viewers about lag busting. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Now, the reset command is quite laggy, but let me just show you something. Scoreboard objectives, reset. No, sorry, scoreboard play. Oh god, scoreboard players reset. All players. That's the asterisk symbol. And then, sorry, getting distracted by the chat. AGS. Blocks. So there's actually nobody in blocks right now, but even though there isn't, I think, is that it's AGS. Okay, let's go with potions drunk. There's almost nobody in there, but if I enter that, it's going to find every entity on the server and reset their score, even if they weren't in there. So just so you know, the reset command, even though it can be nice and like empty your scoreboard, don't run it too often because it does that every time. So that's worth bearing in mind. Now the scoreboards, even though you'd think that there'd be less lag by including more conditions, the more scoreboards you reference, the more times it has to scan, if that makes sense. So for example, score AGS blah equals 1, and then score AGS blah 2 equals 1. That's, even though you might have halved the number of players you're actually finding, you're increasing the lag because you have to search for more people. Now, generally, it's fine. Like most, just running them once is cool. Running them on a slow clock is fine. It's these hyper clocks that, even though they themselves reduce lag because they're quite nice, they don't cause any updates per se, and there's no particles or light updates or anything like that. Commands with specific selectors will cause lag. So that's quite important. So what you can actually do is something Spider showed me here. First of all, a commenter actually mentioned this in the comments of the last video. When you're doing a fill clock, don't replace them with air, replace them with stone. And that stops any light updates happening because there's never a transparent block here. It's always solid. So I've always been doing air and redstone blocks for my fill clocks, but apparently stone is better, and I can understand that. So what we have up here is a hybrid clock. It's a comparator clock linked to a fill clock. And this basically, it has the sort of less lag benefits of a fill clock, because this is constantly updating, but it's slower. So all of these things testing for mob health are being triggered substantially less often than is needed. So if you want something fast being checked, you've only got 3 redstone dust there, so that's still less laggy than, say, having one of these clocks and then a long line of redstone dust running over your command block. So this is quite a nice way of doing it. So the command here is basically just filling the coordinates with a redstone block. So that's basically that square there. And then down here, whenever the redstone block gets spawned above it, this fills that same area with stone. So that's how that works. And you can just right click that to stop it, or remove that block. So that's kind of handy. By the way, I fixed this. Last episode, there was a clock running here. And after a while, I hope they're not saying anything to me in that chat. After a while, I realized that it's kind of not needed because the clock was on if there was one player, but I noticed that if there was one player and he left the game, the sign would say one left. So this now always tests for players regardless of how many people are in the game, and that got rid of the clock basically. So that's good. So it's basically a case of working out what needs to be triggered at what speed. So for example, adding people to the lobby team, this is doing all players within 20 blocks of the center of the lobby, adding to the lobby team. It's very difficult to get. This thing runs 20 times a second. It's very hard to get from the center of that map where you spawn to the edge where you're no longer counted in a 20th of a second. It's just not going to happen. So that can technically be moved. And I haven't finished clearing all this up yet. But 1 second, I'm going to drink some coffee. I spilt so much stuff today. I spilt water. Lots of water. So I always I don't look what I'm doing, basically. So this one here, for example, could be moved up to this hybrid clock up here, and it would still work fine. Some things need to be done very quickly. For instance, the standstill to be counted thing, that relies on exact ticks to work. So that needs to stay there, but it doesn't cause much lag. Same ways with the falling sand summoning, that needs to be as fast as possible. But some things can be slowed down. So we'll be doing a little bit of that. That's basically lag busting with Sparks. Yeah. I'm going to quickly have a call with Spider, see if he has any other advice for us. And I'll be right back. So I've just had a pretty long talk with Spider. We got kind of slightly sidetracked. But in general, he agrees that we haven't really missed anything. Apart from some obvious things. So light updates are a big thing. Repeaters no longer give off light. Dust no longer gives off light. The only redstone component that gives off light, lamps accepted, is torches. So don't generally like using torches anyway because of their burnout. Like this behavior where they burn out makes them very unreliable. Plus, they can't detect very short pulses. They can't invert very, very short pulses. So torches are generally best avoided anyway. This one's fine. It's just the one, and it's not very often flipped. This is just when the game starts and stops. The only other thing is particles. Particles from dust and torches do cause lag, but if they are in the spawn chunks and you are not, then they are not rendered, and that's fine. And the only final thing is that redstone is, there are different redstone strengths. So this is 15, 14, 15, 13, probably 13. As the signal weakens, the formula that's used to calculate what signal strength each block of redstone dust should be is very inefficient. So quickly updating redstone dust is very bad. So redstone dust in general is worth getting rid of because of the particles and the update lag. One more thing. For the reason that I mentioned just now about redstone dust updating, never attach redstone dust to a fill clock. Oh. Wasn't expecting that to happen. But redstone dust on a fill clock is very laggy. Because it's like updating and recalculating 20 times a second. So always try and attach your command blocks directly to fill clocks, even if it means creating another clock. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. It also appears that you can't actually do it anymore. I don't know. That seems to have possibly... Yeah, so that's... No. Okay, well, never mind. I heard that was a thing you need to avoid doing with dust. I'm lagging quite a bit. It's a slightly shorter episode today, but I just wanted to talk about lag a little bit. Not many people know much about it, but if you know more or something I've missed or said wrong, feel free to leave it in the comments. Or if you have any other questions about how laggy something is, you can ask. I don't know if I'll have the answer, but I will try and answer if I know, because not many people know about this stuff, and maps would probably be a lot better if people did. So thank you very much for watching. There'll probably be another episode out soon. I'm just working on this like crazy. Yeah, okay, bye.